The signal came at 3 in the morning, ship time. Lieutenant Kyle Harris was alone in the communications bay when his console lit up with an unknown frequency. He sat up straight and pulled his headphones closer, listening to the faint sound that repeated over and over. It was weak, broken, and desperate. But it was real. Kyle worked quickly, running the signal through every translation program the ship had. After 2 minutes, the computer found a match. The language belonged to the Volani, a peaceful species that humans had met only twice before. They were farmers and builders, not fighters. They had no enemies that anyone knew of, but someone was hurting them now. Kyle grabbed his communicator and called the bridge. "This is Lieutenant Harris in communications. I need to speak with Admiral Morrison immediately. We have an emergency signal." 5 minutes later, Admiral Jack Morrison stood beside Kyle, listening to the message himself. The Admiral was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had commanded ships for 30 years, and he had seen many terrible things. But the sound of the Volani voice begging for help made his jaw tighten. "Play the translation," Morrison said. Kyle pressed a button, and a computer voice spoke the words. "Please help us, anyone. They are killing us. They are taking our children. We cannot fight them. Please, someone answer." The message repeated. It had been repeating for hours, maybe days. Commander Laura Kent entered the room, her uniform still slightly wrinkled from sleep. She was the Admiral's second in command, a sharp woman who thought 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "What do we have?" she asked. "Distress signal from the Volani," Morrison said. "Someone is attacking their colony." Laura checked the star charts on a nearby screen. "That's the Taurish system. It's far outside our territory, sir. We have no authority there. I know where it is. If we respond, we could create a diplomatic incident. We don't even know who is attacking them." Morrison turned to face her. His voice was quiet but firm. "Commander, that message has been playing for hours. Those people are dying while we stand here and talk about diplomacy." Laura met his eyes. She had served with Morrison for 8 years, and she knew that look. He had already made his decision. "What are your orders, Admiral?" "Wake the fleet. All ships prepare for faster-than-light travel. We're going to Taurish." Within the hour, the entire 7th Expeditionary Fleet was moving. 12 warships, carrying over 15,000 human sailors and soldiers, turned away from their patrol route and headed into unknown space. They did not ask permission from Earth. They did not wait for orders from command. They simply went. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Sentinel, watching the stars stretch and blur as the ship entered faster-than-light travel. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. They did not know what they would find at Taurish. They only knew that someone needed help. Laura approached him with a datapad. "I've pulled everything we have on the Volani, sir." Population of this colony was approximately 100,000. Mostly families. They grow crops and trade with nearby systems. No military. No weapons beyond basic farming tools. "Easy targets," Morrison said quietly. "Yes, sir. Who would attack them?" "They have nothing worth stealing." Laura hesitated. "There is one possibility. Intelligence has reports of a species called the Crethony Dominion operating in that region. They're a military empire that expands through conquest. And they take slaves." Morrison's hands curled into fists at his sides. Slaves. The Volani would be perfect for them. Docile, hard-working, and unable to fight back. For a long moment, the Admiral said nothing. He stared at the swirling lights of faster-than-light travel, his face unreadable. When he spoke, his voice was cold. "How long until we reach Taurish?" 14 hours at current speed. Push the engines harder. "I want us there in 10. Laura nodded and turned to relay the order. She paused at the door and looked back. "Admiral, If it is the Crethani, their fleet will outnumber us. They have been conquering systems for decades. They won't be afraid of 12 human ships. Morrison turned to face her. There was something dangerous in his eyes now, something that had been sleeping for a long time. Then we will teach them to be afraid. The fleet pushed forward, engines burning hot as they raced across the empty void between stars. In the crew quarters, soldiers checked their weapons and armor. In the medical bays, doctors prepared for casualties. In the fighter hangars, pilots ran final checks on their ships. No one complained. No one questioned the mission. Every person in the fleet had heard the distress signal by now. They had heard the fear in that alien voice, the desperation of a people facing death. And something deep inside each of them had answered. Humans knew what it meant to suffer. They knew what it meant to be conquered, to be enslaved, to be treated as less than nothing. Their own history was full of such horrors. And they had sworn, centuries ago, that they would never allow it to happen again. Not to themselves. Not to anyone. 10 hours later, the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the towerish system. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the planet ahead. Kyle Harris was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. Oh my God. The planet was burning. Great clouds of smoke rose from the surface where cities had once stood. In orbit, dozens of alien warships moved in slow patterns, firing down at the ground below. Transport vessels flew back and forth, carrying cargo that the sensors quickly identified. Living cargo. Thousands of Vellani, packed into ships like animals. Admiral Morrison stared at the screen. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with cold fire. Around him, his crew watched in horrified silence. Sir, Laura said, her voice tight with anger. Orders? Morrison took a slow breath. When he spoke, every person on the bridge heard the promise in his words. Launch all fighters. Prepare all weapons. And open a channel to those ships. He paused, and his next words were spoken like a death sentence. They wanted judgment. We are here to deliver it. The closer they got to Towerish, the worse it looked. Admiral Morrison stood at the center of the bridge, watching the tactical display update with new information every few seconds. The enemy fleet was larger than they had expected. 34 warships plus another 12 transport vessels. The Krazani Dominion had come prepared for conquest, not for battle. Scan the surface, Morrison ordered. Find me survivors. Lieutenant Kyle Harris worked his console with shaking hands. The images coming from the planet made him sick, but he forced himself to focus. After a minute, he found what the Admiral was looking for. Sir, I'm detecting life signs underground. There are bunkers beneath the main city. Approximately 40,000 Vellani are hiding there. 40,000, Lavra repeated quietly. Out of 100,000. The rest are either dead or on those transport ships, Kyle said. He swallowed hard. Sir, the transports are almost full. If they leave the system, we'll never find those people again. Morrison nodded slowly. What about communications? Can we reach the survivors? Kyle tried several frequencies before finding one that worked. I have a connection, sir. It's weak, but someone is responding. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled with static, and then a voice came through. It was soft and tired, speaking in heavily accented but understandable English. This is Elder Seren of the Tauresh colony. Who is speaking? Please, if you are here to help, we are running out of time. Morrison stepped closer to the microphone. Elder Seren, this is Admiral Jack Morrison of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. We received your distress signal. We are here to help. There was a long pause. When Seren spoke again, there were tears in his voice. Humans, you came. We sent that signal 3 days ago. We did not think anyone would answer. The Crethani told us no one would come. They told us we were alone. You are not alone, Morrison said. Not anymore. Tell me what happened. Soren's story came out in broken pieces. The Crethani had arrived without warning, their ships filling the sky like a dark cloud. They had demanded surrender and promised that cooperation would be rewarded with mercy. The Vallani had no weapons, no fleet, no way to resist. They had surrendered. The Crethani had lied. The soldiers had swept through the cities, separating families and loading the strongest Vallani onto transport ships. Those who resisted were killed. Those who were too old or too sick to work were killed. Children were torn from their parents and sorted like products in a factory. They are still hunting us, Soren said. Their soldiers search the tunnels every few hours. We have blocked many entrances, but they keep finding new ways in. We cannot hold them much longer. Most of those hiding with me are children, Admiral. The young ones whose parents sacrificed themselves to give them time to run. Morrison closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his decision was made. Elder Soren, I need you to keep your people safe for a little longer. Block every entrance you can. Do not let the Crethani take anyone else. We are coming for you. How long? Soren asked. Please, how long must we hold? Morrison looked at his tactical officer. The woman checked her display and held up 2 fingers. 2 hours, Morrison said. Can you give me 2 hours? We will try, Admiral. We will try with everything we have left. The communication ended, and Morrison turned to face his crew. Every eye on the bridge was fixed on him, waiting for orders. He could see the anger in their faces, the same cold fury that burned in his own chest. Good. They would need that anger soon. Commander Kent, he said, what is the status of our fighters? Lavra checked her console. All squadrons ready to launch, sir. Pilots are standing by. And the marine companies? Captain Ben Crawford answered from the back of the bridge. He was a big man with a scarred face and steady hands. Locked and loaded, Admiral. My people are ready to board those transports the moment you give the word. Morrison nodded. Dr. Lawson, what about medical teams? A woman's voice came through the internal speakers. Medical Bay is prepared for mass casualties, sir. I have trauma teams ready to deploy to the surface as soon as it's safe. Everything was in place. The fleet was ready. All that remained was the battle itself. Lavra stepped closer to Morrison and spoke quietly. Admiral, I have to say this one more time. We are outnumbered nearly 3-1. The Crethani have more ships, more guns, and more experience fighting in this region. If we attack, we will take losses. I know. Some of our people will die today. Morrison turned to look at her. His eyes were hard, but not cold. There was something else there, something that Lavra had seen before in the eyes of people who had made peace with difficult choices. Yes, he said, some of us will die, but those 40,000 people in those tunnels will live. Those prisoners on those transports will go home to their families, and the Crethani will learn that there are consequences for what they have done. Lavra held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Understood, sir. What are your orders? Morrison walked to the center of the bridge and pressed a button on his command chair. His voice echoed through every ship in the fleet, reaching every sailor and soldier under his command. All hands, this is Admiral Morrison. In the next few minutes, we will engage a Crethani fleet that outnumbers us significantly. They believe they are strong because they prey on the weak. They believe no one will stop them because no one ever has. Today, we prove them wrong. He paused, letting his words sink in. The people on that planet called for help, and we answered. That is what humans do. That is who we are. Some of us may not survive this battle, but those we save will remember. The galaxy will remember, And every slaver, every tyrant, every coward who thinks they can hurt the innocent without consequence will remember too. Morrison straightened his shoulders and spoke his final command. All ships, battle stations. Prepare to attack. Across the fleet, alarms began to sound. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Fighters launched from their hangars in perfect formation. 15,000 humans prepared for war. And in the tunnels beneath a burning world, 40,000 Vellani heard the distant thunder of human engines and began, for the first time in 3 days, to hope. Warlord Drethkan was eating when the report arrived. He sat in his command chamber aboard the flagship, enjoying a meal that had been prepared by Vellani slaves only hours after their capture. The irony pleased him. The conquered serving the conqueror. This was the natural order of things. A junior officer rushed in, his scales pale with what looked like fear. Warlord, we have detected unknown vessels entering the system. Drethkan did not look up from his food. How many? 12 ships, Warlord. They are approaching in attack formation. 12 ships. Drethkan almost laughed. He commanded 34 warships, each one battle-tested and crewed by warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds. Whoever these newcomers were, they were either very brave or very stupid. Do we know who they are? He asked. They identify themselves as humans, Warlord. We have no records of this species in our databases. Humans. Drethkan had never heard the name. Another weak species, probably. The galaxy was full of them. Pathetic civilizations that hid behind diplomacy and treaties because they lacked the strength to take what they wanted. They were all the same in the end. They all broke. Open a communication channel, Drethkan ordered. Let us see what these humans want. A few moments later, the main screen in his chamber flickered to life. Drethkan found himself looking at an alien face, pale and soft, with no scales or claws or fangs. The creature wore a simple uniform and stood with its hands clasped behind its back. It did not look impressive. I am Admiral Jack Morrison of the Human Expeditionary Fleet, the creature said. Its voice was calm, almost pleasant. You will cease all hostile operations immediately. You will release every prisoner you have taken, and you will surrender your fleet to my command. Drethkan stared at the screen for a moment, then burst into laughter. The sound echoed through the chamber, and his officers joined in, their harsh voices filling the room with mockery. You are amusing, human, Drethkan said when he had finished laughing. You bring 12 ships into my territory and demand that I surrender? Do you know who I am? I am Warlord Drethkan of the Cruthony Dominion. I have conquered more worlds than you have ships. I have broken armies larger than your entire species. The human's expression did not change. I am aware of who you are. I have read reports of your activities. Slavery, murder, genocide. You are a criminal, and you will answer for your crimes. Drethkan leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You dare threaten me? Your fleet is nothing. Your species is nothing. I will crush your ships, enslave your crews, and add humans to my inventory. Perhaps your kind will make good laborers. You seem soft enough for domestic work. You have 30 minutes, the human said, ignoring the threat completely. Release the prisoners and power down your weapons. If you do not comply, I will destroy your fleet. The communication ended. Drethkan sat in stunned silence for a moment, then slammed his fist against the table. Arrogant creature. Send 6 ships to intercept them. Destroy them all and bring me the survivors. I want to watch them beg. The orders were given, and 6 Cruthony warships broke formation to engage the human fleet. Drethkan watched the tactical display with satisfaction, imagining the terror the humans would feel when they saw his ships approaching. But as the minutes passed, something strange happened. Commander Vela, his second in command, approached with a troubled expression. "Warlord, I have been scanning the human vessels. Their weapon systems are unlike anything in our records." "What do you mean?" "The power readings are extremely high, sir. Much higher than our own. And their shields appear to be using a form of technology we have not encountered before." Drethkin waved his hand dismissively. "Tricks, sensor ghosts. No species we have never heard of could possess superior technology. They are bluffing." "With respect, Warlord, I do not believe they are bluffing." "Your opinion is noted and ignored," Drethkin snapped. "Now be silent and watch these humans die." The 6 Crethany ships reached weapons range and opened fire. Bright energy beams shot across the void toward the human fleet. They never arrived. The human ships moved with impossible speed, dodging the attacks with ease. And then they returned fire. Drethkin watched in disbelief as the first Crethany ship exploded. One shot. One single shot from a human weapon had punched through shields that had withstood dozens of battles and turned a warship into scattered debris. The second ship died 3 seconds later. Then the third. Then the fourth. By the time the engagement was over, all 6 Crethany vessels were gone. The battle had lasted less than a minute. The bridge was silent. Every officer stared at the tactical display, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Vela spoke quietly. "Warlord, the human fleet is advancing. They will reach weapons range of our main force in approximately 12 minutes. Drethkin's mind raced. This was impossible. The Crethany Dominion had never suffered a defeat like this. They were the conquerors, the predators, the strong. They did not lose, but those ships were gone, destroyed as easily as a child crushing insects. "All ships form defensive positions," Drethkin ordered, his voice less steady than before. "Concentrate fire on the human flagship. They cannot be as strong as they appear." It was luck. It must have been luck. But even as he spoke, Drethkin felt something he had not felt in many years. Something cold and unfamiliar crawling up his spine. Fear. On the bridge of the USS Sentinel, Admiral Morrison watched the last Crethany ship in the intercepting force vanish from sensors. His crew did not cheer. There was no celebration. This was not a game. "Enemy casualties?" he asked. "All 6 ships destroyed," Lawver reported. "No survivors detected." Morrison nodded slowly. 6 ships. Thousands of Crethany soldiers, dead in an instant. It was necessary, but it was not something to celebrate. "The main fleet is reforming into a defensive position," Lawver continued. "They're going to try to concentrate their fire. It won't help them." Morrison turned to address the fleet. "All ships, advance. Target the transport vessels first. Disable their engines, but do not destroy them. We need those prisoners alive." The fleet moved forward, engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Behind them, the first Crethany bodies were already freezing in the void, a warning to all who might follow. The 30 minutes had passed. Judgment had arrived. The battle above Tauresh was not a fight. It was a lesson. Human weapons tore through Crethany shields like paper. Human fighters swarmed around enemy warships, targeting engines and weapon systems with deadly precision. The Crethany tried to fight back, tried to use their numbers and their experience, but nothing worked. Admiral Morrison stood at the center of the bridge, calm as stone, issuing orders with quiet efficiency. Squadron 3, disabled at transport on the left. Squadron 5, cover the boarding teams. All capital ships, focus fire on their heavy cruisers. Lawver watched the tactical display and felt something she had never expected to feel in battle. Pity. The Crethany were dying by the thousands, and they could not understand why. They had spent generations as predators, conquering the weak and enslaving the helpless. They had never imagined that someone stronger might come for them. Now they knew. Warlord Drethkan's flagship is attempting to retreat, Kyle reported from his station. He's trying to break through our lines. Morrison shook his head. Lock his escape route. He doesn't leave until I say he leaves. 3 human ships moved to intercept the fleeing flagship, their weapons charging with deadly intent. Drethkan's vessel turned hard, looking for another way out, but there was none. The humans had surrounded him completely. On the surface below, the real rescue was beginning. Captain Ben Crawford led the 1st Marine unit onto the ground. They landed near the entrance to the underground shelters, their boots hitting scorched earth that had been green farmland only days before. The smell of smoke and death was everywhere. Move fast, Crawford ordered his team. Find the survivors and secure the area. Watch for Crethany soldiers. They pushed into the tunnels, weapons ready. The darkness was thick, broken only by the lights on their helmets. After a few minutes, they heard sounds ahead. Footsteps, voices, movement. Crawford held up his fist, and his team stopped. He listened carefully, trying to identify the sounds. Then a small face appeared around the corner. A Vellani child, no more than 5 or 6 years old, with wide eyes full of terror. The child saw the armored humans and opened its mouth to scream. Crawford quickly lowered his weapon and knelt down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Hey there," he said softly. "It's okay. We're here to help. We're friends." The child stared at him, trembling. Behind the child, more figures emerged from the shadows. Dozens of Vellani, thin and exhausted, clutching each other for support. At the front was an elderly male with tired eyes and a gentle face. Elder Sorin. "You came," Sorin said, his voice breaking. "You actually came." Crawford smiled beneath his helmet. "Admiral Morrison sends his regards. Now let's get your people out of here." The evacuation began. Human soldiers guided Vellani, survivors through the tunnels and onto waiting dropships. Dr. Amy Lawson had set up medical stations near the landing zone, and her teams worked frantically to treat the wounded and the sick. Many of the survivors were children. Their parents had hidden them in the deepest parts of the shelters before going out to face the Crethany. Most of those parents had not returned. Lawson watched a human medic carry a tiny Vellani infant toward a transport ship. The baby was crying softly, reaching for arms that would never hold it again. The doctor had to turn away for a moment and wipe her eyes. In orbit. The battle was ending. One by one, the Crethany ships fell silent. Some were destroyed. Some were disabled. A few tried to surrender, and Morrison accepted their surrender with cold professionalism. The prisoners would be dealt with later. The transport ships carrying enslaved Vellani were boarded by human Marines. Crawford himself led the assault on the largest vessel, his team moving through narrow corridors filled with frightened prisoners. What they found made even hardened soldiers stop and stare. The Vellani were packed into cargo holds like animals. Hundreds of them in spaces meant for 50. There was no food, no water, no medical care. The dead lay among the living, and no one had bothered to remove them. Crawford found a young Vellani female curled in a corner, protecting 2 small children with her body. She looked up at him with empty eyes, expecting more cruelty. "It's over," Crawford said quietly. "You're safe now. We're taking you home." The female did not respond. She simply stared at him as if she could not understand the words. After 3 days of horror, kindness had become something she no longer recognized. Crawford gently helped her to her feet and guided her toward the exit. His soldiers did the same for the others, carrying those who could not walk, speaking softly to those who were too afraid to move. On the bridge of the USS Sentinel, Morrison received word that the last transport had been secured. All prisoners were accounted for. The Vellani were free, But the battle was not quite over. Warlord Drethkan's flagship had been disabled, its engines destroyed, and its weapons offline. Human boarding parties were cutting through the hull, preparing to enter. Laura approached Morrison with a question in her eyes. "Sir, Drethkan is requesting communication. He wants to negotiate." Morrison considered this for a moment. "Put him through." The screen flickered, and Drethkan appeared. He looked different now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something desperate and small. His scales were pale, and his eyes darted nervously. "Admiral Morrison," he said, his voice shaking, "I believe we can reach an agreement. I will release all prisoners and leave this system. In return, you will allow my fleet to withdraw. We can pretend this never happened." Morrison stared at him in silence. "I have resources," Drethkan continued, speaking faster now. "Wealth, information about other Crethany operations. I can give you whatever you want. Just let me go." Morrison leaned forward slightly. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You attacked a defenseless colony. You murdered thousands of innocent people. You enslaved families and separated children from their parents. You packed living beings into cargo holds like livestock and laughed at their suffering." He paused. "And now you want to negotiate?" Drethkan opened his mouth to respond, but Morrison continued. "There is no negotiation. There is no deal. You will be taken into custody, and you will face trial for your crimes. Your fleet is destroyed. Your empire will hear what happened here today. And every slaver in the galaxy will know that humanity answered this call and delivered judgment." The communication ended. 10 minutes later, human Marines dragged Warlord Drethkan from his command chamber in chains. The most feared conqueror in the sector had been reduced to a prisoner, whimpering for mercy that would not come. The battle for Talresh was over. The humans had won, but the real work was just beginning. 3 days after the battle, Talresh was beginning to heal. The fires had been put out. The dead had been buried with proper ceremonies. Human engineers worked alongside Villani survivors to repair damaged buildings and restore power to the shelters. Food and medical supplies flowed from human ships to the surface below, more than enough for everyone. Dr. Amy Lawson had not slept properly since arriving. There were too many wounded, too many traumatized children, too many broken minds that needed care. But she kept working, because every life she saved was a victory against the darkness. She was treating a young Villani male when Elder Sarin approached. The old leader looked exhausted, but there was light in his eyes that had not been there before. "Hope." "Doctor," Sarin said quietly, "I wanted to thank you personally. Your people have saved us. We can never repay this debt." Lawson shook her head. "There is no debt, Elder. This is what we do." Sarin smiled sadly. "That is what your admiral said as well. I do not understand it. The Crethany attacked us because we were weak, because we had nothing of value to offer them. But you came from across the stars to save us, knowing you would receive nothing in return. Why?" Lawson thought about the question for a moment. How could she explain centuries of human history? The wars, the cruelty, the slavery and genocide that humans had inflicted upon each other. And how, after all of that suffering, humanity had finally learned that the only way forward was to protect the innocent. "A long time ago," she said slowly, "my people did terrible things to each other. We hurt and killed and enslaved because we thought it made us strong. It took us a very long time to understand that true strength is not measured by what you can destroy. It is measured by what you can protect." Sarin nodded slowly. "Your people have learned a hard lesson." "Yes, and we swore never to forget it." On the bridge of the USS Sentinel, Admiral Morrison was preparing for something important. The trial of Warlord Drethkan had been brief but thorough. Human judges had reviewed the evidence, including recordings from Crethany ships showing exactly what had been done to the Volani. Survivors had testified, describing horrors that made even hardened officers look away. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Drethkin and his senior officers were sentenced to life imprisonment on a human penal colony. They would never see their homeworld again. They would never command troops again. They would spend the rest of their lives knowing that their empire of cruelty had been broken by the very weakness they despised. But Morrison wanted more than justice for the Volani. He wanted to send a message. Commander Laura Kent entered the bridge with a datapad. "Sir, the broadcast is ready. We can transmit on all known frequencies whenever you give the order." Morrison nodded. "Good. Make sure it reaches every corner of the galaxy. I want everyone to hear this." The broadcast had been prepared carefully. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Morrison stood before the camera and spoke directly, his voice clear and steady. "This message is for everyone who can hear it. My name is Admiral Jack Morrison of the Human Expeditionary Fleet. 3 days ago, we received a distress signal from the Volani colony on Talresh. They were under attack by the Crethany Dominion, a species that makes its living through slavery and conquest." He paused, letting the words settle. "We answered that call. The Crethany fleet has been destroyed. Their leader has been captured and sentenced. The Volani people are free." Morrison leaned forward slightly. "I want to be very clear about something. Humanity did not know the Volani well. We had only met them twice before. They had nothing to offer us, no resources we needed, no strategic value. We came because they asked for help, and because helping the innocent is what we do. To every species suffering under oppression, to every civilization facing extinction at the hands of tyrants, to every child crying out in the darkness for someone to save them, I want you to know this. You are not alone. If you send a signal, we will hear it. If you ask for help, we will come. No matter how far, no matter how dangerous, no matter how powerful your enemy is." Morrison's eyes hardened. "And to every slaver, every conqueror, every empire that believes might makes right, I have a different message. The galaxy is changing. There is a new power among the stars, and we do not tolerate cruelty. We do not negotiate with those who prey upon the weak. We do not forgive those who harm the innocent." He straightened his shoulders. "If you continue your ways, we will find you, and we will deliver judgment." The broadcast ended. Across the galaxy, the message spread like fire. Dozens of species heard it. Hundreds of worlds received it. Some laughed at the arrogance of these unknown humans. Some ignored it as empty words, but many listened. Many remembered. On a dozen enslaved planets, prisoners whispered to each other about the species that had saved the Volani. On 100 oppressed worlds, people looked up at the stars and wondered if help might finally be coming. And in the halls of empires built on suffering, leaders who had never known fear began to feel something cold in their hearts. On the surface of Talresh, Admiral Morrison walked among the survivors one last time before the fleet departed. He found Elder Sorin sitting near a makeshift memorial, surrounded by flowers that the Volani had placed for their dead. "You are leaving?" Sorin asked. "Yes, but we will return. Human ships will patrol this sector from now on. The Crethany will never threaten you again." Sorin stood slowly and faced the Admiral. "I have lived a long time, Morrison. I have seen many terrible things. But I have also seen something wonderful in these past days. I have seen beings who had nothing to gain risk everything for strangers. I have seen warriors who fight not for conquest, but for justice. I have seen children smile again because someone cared enough to save them." He reached out and took Morrison's hand in both of his own. "Whatever happens to my people, whatever the future brings, we will never forget what humanity has done for us. And we will tell our children and our children's children. About the day the humans came and delivered us from evil. Morrison nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then he turned and walked back toward the dropship that would take him to his flagship. Behind him, the Lani children waved goodbye, their small hands reaching toward the sky. The fleet departed the next morning, leaving behind a world that was battered but alive. The journey home would be long, and there would be many more battles ahead. The broadcast had made humanity a target as well as a hero. Enemies were already gathering in the dark places of the galaxy, planning revenge. But Morrison did not regret his choice. Some things were worth fighting for. Some principles were worth dying for. And as long as humans drew breath, the innocent would never face the darkness alone. The galaxy had believed itself ruled by the cruel and the mighty. It was about to learn that humanity had a different definition of strength, and judgment was just beginning.